Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 11th of December 2017, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me today, Patrick Henningsen from 21st Century Wire. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
Right, well, we're going to get straight into it and start off with Pesco because the Defence Cooperation Agreement is ratified. The European Council has established permanent structured cooperation with now 25 member states participating. So they adopted a decision establishing permanent structured cooperation less than a month after receiving a joint notification by 23 member states of their intention to participate. But since then, on December the 7th, Ireland and Portugal have notified their decision to join PESCO. And so the agreement today is set out the list of participating member states. It set out a list of ambitious, as they describe it, ambitious and more binding common commitments undertaken by participating member states, including regularly increasing defence budgets in real terms in order to reach agreed objectives. They've set out PESCO governance with an overarching level, maintaining the coherence and the ambition of the PESCO, complemented by specific governing procedures at projects level, if you can work out what that means. I'm not too certain, but on we go. They say that they've laid out administrative arrangements, including a secretariat, and they say that member states participating in PESCO also adopted a declaration at the same time as the adoption of the decision establishing PESCO. The declaration welcomes the political agreement identifying an initial list of 17 projects to be undertaken under PESCO. The projects cover areas such as training, capacity development, operational readiness in the field of defence. These initial projects are expected to be formally adopted by the Council in early 2018. So in early 2018, we're going to see that formal adoption of a list of projects. They're also going to agree a common set of governance rules for projects, and they're going to agree the general conditions under which third states could be invited to participate in individual projects. So it is a done deal. The Council of the European Union, this is the heads of state of the European Union, have agreed, and away we go.
Yes, formal adoption of projects at a government level. I think that's going to include things like research and development, certainly streamlining procurement procedures and so forth. So PESCO, not to be confused with Tesco, although this is a military supermarket which is being built in Europe, Mike.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, and you've completely... I've forgotten what I was going to say next, so we'll move straight ahead because
it was that good, wasn't it?
It was that good, yes. So the other fantastic piece of news today, of course, is the fact that, Benjamin Netanyahu was visiting the head of PESCO herself, Federica Mogherini, the head of the new
president of Europe, pretty much from a public relations standpoint. She's pretty much doing the statesman job, isn't she, for major announcements, interacting with the outside, with the global EU.
She is the de facto foreign minister.
She is
in waiting. She's the deputy president of the European Commission. But yes, she is behaving like a foreign minister.
Absolutely.
So she was meeting Benjamin Netanyahu today, who, of course, not really taking the advice of Donald Trump, because when he made when Trump made his initial statement about recognition of Jerusalem as the capital city of Israel, in that sort of announcement to Israel, he sort of said, just downplay this a little bit, please. Just downplay. What does Netanyahu do? He immediately gets on the stage, and the world stage that is, and starts traveling the world, trying to encourage every nation under the sun to support Trump in this idea that Jerusalem is to be the capital of Israel. And I think this kind of highlights the situation of the European Union, if we think about it in terms of PESCO and Defence Union as well, because what is being created here is a single block with multiple. So he doesn't need to go to Germany and France, and he only needs to go to one place now.
And this is the whole significance of what Federica Mogherini is doing in the public sphere is, from a public relations point of view, she's got 28 member states behind her when she talks. Every word that comes out of her mouth has 28, theoretically, symbolically, 28 member states behind her. So this is much more, this totally transforms the sort of world stage in terms of diplomacy, in terms of geopolitics. So what you're getting here is a future look at what the United States of Europe will look like in terms of international relations right here. You also saw this with the Iran nuclear deal as well, and you'll see this also with a number of other important issues which are being fleshed out right now. So she's become the go-to person for that sort of money shot with the gold stars on the blue flag behind her. And Bibi Netanyahu is the consummate political animal. He is like a desperate labor union leader running around trying to forge coalitions and grab carpetbag votes and you name it. This is what he's doing. It seems to me like an act of desperation, Mike. That Netanyahu would feel so compelled to go on a whistle-stop tour right after that was supposed to kind of, keep it down for just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
So he's not keeping it down, and as a result, there is protest.
There is. So we're probably going to see something big happen today in Lebanon. We were just on the phone last night with Lebanese journalist Marwa Osman, and there were huge demonstrations yesterday at the American Embassy compound, which is north of Beirut. The Americans actually relocated the embassy outside of the city center there, up in the hills, and it's basically a military fortified type compound. And Palestinian protesters and supporters came and actually managed to tear part of the secure steel gates away as well. I mean, this is the most fortified embassy, one of the most, probably top 5 in the world, and it shows you how, I don't know what the word is, but basically if protesters want to tear down a wall, they'll tear it down. It doesn't matter how big or thick it is. But so expect upwards of, I don't know, 10,000 plus. We're going to be out in the streets today, maybe 20,000 in Beirut.
So in Beirut, in the suburbs, Dahia, is that pronounced?
Yeah, this is Dahia. This is more the Shiite neighborhood. This is a Hezbollah stronghold in terms of politically, anyway. And this is the area of Beirut that the Americans tell any visitors not to visit because it's full of terrorists.
Right.
So it's going to scare them away.
Okay, well, let's move on then, because Netanyahu actually has also been meeting Monsieur Macron, the president of France. Well, apparently we've all got to read the Bible because that's where it says that Jerusalem is the capital.
Unbelievable. So Bibi Netanyahu says, look, Jerusalem is the capital. Read your Bible. And that's... It was so crass, this speech. It was also very patronizing, and you could see the young Macron there, who's still very green behind the ears as a statesman, not knowing quite what to make of it or how to react. But for Netanyahu to make this speech now, he's now invoking the Bible openly and publicly, which is something that they didn't do before. And again, this plays into what I said earlier, Mike. You're looking at a desperate political leader there, and so he's trying to prop up this narrative that somewhere in the Bible God played the role of the estate agent and has gifted this land to this new inhabitants, some of who arrived in 1948, and that's it. End of story. No more argument. It's in the Bible. So this is the argument that Israel's now putting forward openly, which before, Mike, was kind of kept kind of off to the fringes and discussed in certain areas, but they didn't really come out and have that as the major plank of their foreign policy and their domestic policy. But now there it is. So it's all out in the open now. I don't know what comes next, Mike, but I think you're going to see a lot more protests and a lot more, potentially, maybe some more violence in streets and demonstrations around the world.
Okay, well, let's move on to Syria, and well, Mr. Putin has arrived there.
There he is, coming off the plane at the Latakia Khmeimim Air Force Base, and so he's there to announce formally, has ordered his defense minister to withdraw Russian troops back to their permanent positions in the homeland, in Russia. So this is amazing in one sense because this is exactly what Putin said he would do when he arrived last in when they redeployed the Russian forces before.
Yeah.
So what you're looking at here, Mike, is a statesman, and you say, how do you get an 86% approval rating? How does a leader get that? Well, one thing that you can do is if you do everything exactly what you said you're going to do, and you actually do it, and you deliver on everything that you promised, there's a good chance that you will get an 86% approval rating.
I mean, I realize there's lots of politicians probably out there that might listen to what you've said. That question that you've asked, and you said, well, you get an 86% approval rating by fixing the polls.
By fixing the polls.
But this would be the Western political thought, because they cannot conceive of the idea of actually becoming a politician and doing what you say you're going to do.
Right. So we project our cynicism that we have in the West. We're constantly projecting this all over the world and saying, no, you don't want good, competent leadership. You don't want coherent foreign policy. What you want is a fractured, ramshackle, every month we're rotating our cabinet type government that's totally dysfunctional. That's what you want. That's real democracy. So we totally project this cynicism on every other country, especially in the developing world, not knowing that there are people around the world, Mike, that actually want strong, coherent leadership, especially in times of crisis. They do exist, these countries. They may not necessarily exist in Western Europe or the United States, but they're out there. This is a reality, and this is what Russia is kind of demonstrating on the world stage this week.
Well, let's talk about one of the best examples that Britain can provide, which is a really sad indictment, and that is Boris, because, of course, last week we weren't sure where he was because he was busy in Brussels getting involved in NATO-EU relations and EU military unification, so that couldn't be talked about, and he basically disappeared from the Western media. He then went to Iran over the weekend, where he was trying to deal with this situation over Ms. Zaghari Ratcliffe. But today, Patrick, he is in United Arab Emirates on the last leg of his Gulf visit to discuss Yemen, because apparently by going to the United Arab Emirates and discussing with them the situation, that's going to solve the problem overnight.
It certainly is, because after all, it is the UAE who have deployed their mercenary army to fight alongside Saudi Arabia and, funny enough, fighting alongside Al-Qaeda in Yemen, which is quite an odd coalition.
Isn't it amazing that everywhere that Boris goes, he seems to always bump into people that have direct links to Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda related organizations?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just coincidence. It must be coincidence.
Even in Westminster, it happens. So it's amazing. So what is Britain going to get out of this? Well, maybe selling some arms to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, selling some Typhoons. This is probably what he's over there doing. In fact, Mike, that's what David Cameron and Tony Blair both did, is they acted as sales reps for the arms industry. So they're there to close deals, essentially.
Absolutely.
Arms deals. And to hell with the people in Yemen. Who cares about them? We just need to drop as many bombs as we can before the next general election.
Speaking of Yemen, geopolitics alert here. The headline is, with Saleh dead, will the U.S. now consider direct military action in Yemen? This
is a good question. And if you look at the United States had passed a resolution back in November to sort of step up. We'll look at that in a second. Yeah. There it is. And so this House vote went through, but the problem is, Mike, the action that was supposed to back up what looks like a coup to overthrow Ansarullah, or what the Americans call the Houthis, in the capital Sana'a, with the help of UAE forces and other pieces of that puzzle dispatched out of Aden. It didn't happen, Mike. So something went awry here. Perhaps Ansarullah was tipped off about what was going to happen. And so the U.S. it seemed to me that they were slated to deploy a significant amount of military assets into Yemen, probably under the guise of an anti-terror operation. But all that's needed here is to declare the Houthis Iranian-backed and therefore a terrorist group, and that would sort of open the door for an intervention here. That seems to me what Congress is setting up there. So they're putting the ball on the tee, Mike, and right now Trump's deciding which club to pull out of the bag to whack that with, and off they go. Another deployment, another crisis in the Middle East, another distraction as well, to distract from the complete failure of the United States in Syria, but also the fact that the United States have 2,000 plus troops still stationed inside Syria. This is after ISIS has been defeated. So this is going to be a problem going forward.
An occupying army.
An occupying army in a country completely uninvited and totally, I might add, against international law and the rules-based global order that Theresa May often speaks about, Mike.
Well, speaking of Theresa May, at the weekend she finally offered congratulations to Iraq on the final defeat of ISIS. It took her some time.
Credit where credit's due, and we always do give credit where credit's due. That was probably the first move that she's ever made as prime minister that's truly a statesperson-like. Is that politically correct? Stateswoman-like, statesmen-like, whichever the case is. That's the first true move that May has done to act like a statesperson. So to acknowledge the fact that, yes, Iraq defeated ISIS in Iraq, and it was not the U.S.-led coalition. The U.S.-led coalition provided some air support, but by the way, the Iraqi government's paid for those airstrikes. By the way, Uncle Sam invoiced the Iraqi government for those airstrikes. Very expensive as well.
Right, so Theresa May has said that. That government position doesn't seem to extend to Syria, because in Syria we're still saying that, well, we defeated ISIS in Syria. Britain is saying that it was the US-led coalition that did the job, and the RAF, of course, part and parcel of that. Well, the Russians aren't quite as willing to accept that, and this is Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova, who said, our Western partners have been saying in the recent days that it was not Russia, but them, the coalition, that defeated the Islamic State in Syria. The last to say this was French Foreign Minister Monsieur Le Drian. Dear sirs, stop it. Your successes in Iraq, your successes are Iraq, Libya and Afghanistan. Come on, be proud of them. And I think that pretty much sums up the situation, because we have absolutely destroyed those countries. Through our actions. And unlike other heads of state, for some reason, the heads of state in our countries, which are responsible for this, haven't been brought to The Hague to discuss potential war crimes. Yeah,
because our heads of state sound like the foreign ministry of Oceania at the moment. They can't seem to get the narrative right, hence Maria Zakharova can destroy her opponents with rhetoric, because Russia has the high ground in terms of this argument. Therefore, they're able to apply real satire downstream, which is phenomenal. But that kind of shows you can't apply satire like that unless you are, you've got the high ground morally. So clearly, Russia does.
Right, now you wanted to highlight this from Stars and Stripes. This is a report saying 44,000 unknown military personnel stationed around the world.
This is extraordinary, Mike. So this is from one of the U.S. Army's main communication portals. 44,000. They cannot and will not stipulate exactly where and what these 44,000 are doing. We talked about 2,000 plus in Syria, Mike, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I would say the U.S. have troops deployed in Yemen right now as well, and probably a number of other countries. And Britain also falls into this category, although the numbers are much, much less. And so this is incredible. So what's this costing? Is this transparent? Is this how the U.S. are running their operations overseas now, off books?
And how much Department for International Development money and USAID money is going to actually support this? Yeah. Is this on the official military budget, or is this being classed as aid? And of course, we know that in Britain's case, we're sending troops to other countries to train the local government military personnel and so on, police as well, we're training. And then, having done that training, we seem to find that these countries tend to have some kind of internal insurgency or some kind of internal strife. 44,000 military personnel stationed around the world, they should just be brought back home, really, and leave people to build their own nations without interference from neo-colonialist agendas?
So the answer to your question, Mike, is it's a bit of both. Some of these things are going through the Department of Defense. Some other things to support activity using privatized suppliers or NGOs. This is sort of off the books. So this is a combination of both. They're complementing each other. This is how neocolonialism is done in the 21st century now. Most of it is off the books.
Okay, now poor old Mikhail Saakashvili, he is getting quite a bit of coverage on the UK column over the last week or two. Well, he was arrested, then he wasn't, then he was, and now he's on hunger strike.
A sad character, if there ever was one. Truly a tragic character of geopolitics. And
I mean, is this what happens, Patrick, whenever Soros drops you? You basically fall apart.
You fall apart. You end up on the roof of a prison in a bathrobe, clenching your fist and shaking it to your supporters down below. Or are they his supporters? We don't know. But this poor guy, I mean, this is what happens when you go to work as a globalist stooge for Washington, for George Soros. This is where you end up. So pay attention, anybody out there who is planning on getting George or Uncle Sam to provide your magic carpet for your geopolitical ambitions. This is where you're going to end up, exactly where Saakashvili has ended up.
Yes. Now you've been quite surprised that he's been arrested in Ukraine. I mean, because your point, I think, is that it's a pretty hard thing to do to get yourself arrested in Ukraine. They tend to put up with quite a lot of corruption.
Well, yeah, it's practically a criminal mafia state. Was put in power really by a beer hall putsch in 2014. I mean, how can you fall afoul? Someone as crooked as Saakashvili, he would be perfectly at home in that sort of environment, and they would want guys like this, I would imagine. But apparently, maybe they're trying to tighten up their act in the Ukraine, and there's not many places left, Mike, you see. If the doors are shut globally, where do you go? If you couldn't make it in the Ukraine, there's only one place left. You have to go to Albania, which is now being run by Tony and Sherry Blair. So this is the last stop for a globalist stooge, is Albania, with a job with Tony Blair and Associates. And you think I'm joking? Go ahead and look it up. Tony Blair is now, and his wife are half in charge, it seems, of the government in Albania.
Well, he's in charge of the government. She's in charge of the judiciary.
Of the courts, yeah.
So it's a pretty bad combination for that country.
There could be a job opening for a lawyer who's going on hunger strike right now.
Yeah.
In Kiev. We'll see.
But Ukraine, of course, well, the revolution hasn't done them much good. Patrick, at the end of the day, Ukraine is Europe's poorest nation with a $220 average monthly wage.
Yeah.
For a European country, that's a pretty bad situation.
It's appalling. So it's 190 euros a month is the figure that you'd be looking at there. I mean, they think it's bad in Portugal with the 700 euro a month wage. It's a basket case. The Ukraine is an economic basket case that's just a teetering on the edge of being an IMF, another IMF plantation for usury loans internationally. So. But it's also been totally colonized, Mike, by a couple of U.S. corporations have managed to take over. I'm talking about companies like Cargill, Monsanto, and these firms have moved in, taken over the agricultural sector, at least a good portion of it in the Ukraine, which is considered the breadbasket, one of the major breadbaskets of the world. Who knows what it's going to be? It could be the world's #1 GMO producing country probably in a few years. We don't know. But that's exactly what happened after the U.S.-backed coup in 2014. Oops, did I call it a coup? Was I not supposed to call it a coup?
I couldn't comment on that.
What was a putsch then?
A putsch?
A putsch.
Okay, well, no signs of Cronus here, Patrick. Cronus, of course, is Gavin Williamson's, our new Defence Secretary. That's his tarantula, his spider, his pet spider, which was evicted from the Ministry of Defence over the weekend because basically his staff didn't like it too much. So some staff are heading off on sick leave because they couldn't deal with Cronus. He had to leave. Cronus had to leave, but he didn't get taken to Qatar. apparently to help Gavin Williamson push Qatar into buying £6 billion worth of Typhoon jets. So here we are.
Well done.
But the deal has been done without Cronus' presence, which has got to be a feather in the cap for Gavin Williamson, and I'm sure will help him achieve leadership of the Tory party in the not too distant future.
Sure, you're looking at the future, potentially the future party leader, prime minister.
Very likely, I think.
Or maybe party leader.
When this deal was done for 24 Typhoons, he said, "It's a great pleasure to sign our biggest export deal for the Typhoon in a decade. These formidable jets will boost the Qatari military's mission to tackle the challenges we both share in the Middle East, supporting stability in the region and delivering security at home." Now, Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, last week, Britain once again stated that Saudi Arabia was its key ally in the Middle East, but Saudi Arabia seems to still have a bit of a thing about Qatar. So we don't really seem to worry about that too much when arms deals are concerned. We don't worry about sort of friendships or any of that stuff.
Yeah, generally people who are dealers, no matter what they're dealing, they really don't care who they deal to, anybody who's willing to buy. So that's extraordinary. So Britain's managed to sidestep that sort of spat between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the rival emirate, Qatar, because, hey,
it's just business.
It's global Britain is open for business. It doesn't really matter to who.
Absolutely. Now, of course, last week the smiling assassin, the baby-faced assassin, rather, is his correct terminology. Gavin Williamson had said that really those ISIS, if there are any British people that had been fighting for ISIS, they should just be killed where they are rather than coming back to this country. Well, we didn't like that too much, and this article here in True Publica is from a retired British military brigadier, and he is saying pretty much what we said last week. He said, "As a former soldier who has had his fair share of operational deployments, I abhor the statement from the Secretary of State for Defence this morning about British citizens who are fighting overseas with Daesh. His ill-judged comments advocating illegal assassinations are not only wrong, they are dangerous." He wanted to say, "I do not support, sympathise or condone anyone going to fight with this barbaric and reprehensible organisation. However, there are appropriate processes for dealing with those who do so and then seek to return to this country, and that does not include extrajudicial killing. Soldiers believe in fighting fair and in fighting for a greater good. The Defence Secretary's approach would lower our standards to those of our enemies. It would tarnish the British Armed Forces' reputation around the world and put people's lives at risk at home." I think we probably agree with that position.
Yeah, I think so. He looks sort of like Emmanuel Macron in that shot there. The two of them are doppelgangers for each other.
You're suggesting a genetic connection?
I don't know.
That could possibly be fake news,
yeah.
Patrick, which brings us on to...
Speaking of fake news.
Yes, perhaps the best weekend ever for fake news.
Pretty good.
And we start on Friday with this from Dave Weigel, who is... I can't remember who he's working
Washington
for.
Post.
Washington Post, thank you very much. Yeah. And he tweeted this out on Friday because Donald Trump was holding one of his mass rallies. And as you can see, the stadium, the photograph that he tweeted out, the stadium is mostly empty. And he said packed to the rafters. He was implying that nobody had come out to see Trump. Mm-hmm. Well, Trump responded quite quickly and said he required an apology. And the Washington Post was forced to publish the fact that Trump had called for an apology over what they're describing as an inaccurate tweet. Yeah. Is that a fair description, an inaccurate tweet?
I think that's a bit light. I think it's a load of, you know what, when you have a journalist for a mainstream newspaper putting out tweets like this, it's almost like the campaign's still going, Mike. And,
right.
I guess they didn't get the memo at the Washington Post. The campaign actually ended last November, and they actually did declare a winner in the elections, unfortunately. So this is Washington Post, one of the great producers of fake news, owned by Jeff Bezos, who's now the richest man in the world, I'm told. Well, one of the richest anyway on paper.
Well, Dave Weigel, whatever his name is, did apologize. Sure thing, I apologize. I deleted the photo, he said, after he had been told he had got it wrong. He was confused by the image of Donald Trump walking in the bottom right-hand corner. So because he saw a photograph of a stadium and Donald Trump was walking in on the bottom left. He thought that meant that Donald Trump was getting ready to speak, and the event was in full swing.
Yes.
He didn't check his facts.
Yes.
He just went ahead with it. Well, he's not the only one, because also on Friday, CNN apparently didn't check their facts.
Yes, well, CNN is the premier fake news outlet on the planet, and they're going to retain their crown, as I said last night. They're going to retain their crown for quite some time after this story, Mike. This is extraordinary. So CNN, one of their great scoops, one of the great exclusives that somehow the Trump team got a hold of a cache of the DNC leaks, and were given encryption keys, all very cloak and dagger, and all this was done before the information was publicly available here. And they're blaming Donald Trump Jr. here as part of this scandal. This is the original story, Mike.
This is the original story.
This has been scrubbed, by the way.
Right, so we'll come on to that in a second. Now, that's the original story, and this is the person who wrote that story, Manu Raju.
Yeah.
He's not a junior.
No, he's not. But the problem with CNN is even their senior reporters, they're not much better than someone working for a high school newspaper, Mike. And I'm not exaggerating there. They have a whole legion of these buffoons, and I'm being very kind when I say buffoon, because the amount of these fake stories that CNN has produced, not just in relation to Donald Trump or Russian collusion, but all the Syria reporting, a lot of their fake reporting from Yemen as well. It's endless with CNN. There is no end to the amount of fake news that this outlet can produce, and this is just one of the people that will deliver them. And how do you get someone to do fake news like this? You pay them a lot of money, Mike.
Yes.
They're on north of $1 million, just about all of these major anchors. I think on the low end, probably 700,000. 600,000 would be the low end for some of the junior reporters like Manu Raju, who's a senior junior, I'll call him.
So anyway, they were claiming that this email that Donald Trump had been sent was sent on the 4th of the month. But here is the email, and it's quite clearly the 14th of the month. And that 10-day difference was quite significant because, in fact, within that 10-day period, WikiLeaks had released the leaked emails.
They did, and so that makes you wonder, when CNN said they had 2 sources, did any of those sources actually bother checking the information? Something's missing here, Mike.
Well, did either of the sources send CNN the email? Because surely if somebody, I could go and I can whisper to a journalist something in their ear, and any journalist worth their salt is going to say, documentation, please.
This is just a made-up story. You really want my honest opinion? This is a completely fabricated news story that's completely spun out of thin air by CNN and stitched together by a couple of people that they must have grabbed to say, oh yeah, and boom, okay, let's run with it. This is a good scoop. So
unfortunately, they had to retract somewhat, so they changed the title. The title of the story is now Email Pointed Trump Campaign to WikiLeaks Documents. And in here, they've had to put a correction, which says, but no apology, Patrick.
No, they apparently, well, we'll find out later.
We'll find out. But before we do find out, we'll just mention this, because in some of the coverage of this, in the alternative press at least, people have been posting video clips, and one of the video clips, which I can't show you on screen,
the original report,
was the original report made by Mr.
Manu Raju.
Well, unfortunately, that has been taken down, and the account that was hosting it has been closed by YouTube. Now, I would have thought there was a public interest situation here. YouTube should not have taken this down, because this is absolutely in the public interest.
Sure. This is the biggest cable news broadcaster in the world, fabricating a news story and putting it out as fact. And then so CNN or the YouTube and Google are colluding, Mike, with CNN to cover their tracks for fake news they produce. Is this what the future is going to look like, Mike? Mainstream outlets can put out fake news, and then Google and YouTube will help to disappear all of the lies which they have published, and then they even will go and rewrite their articles and totally transform and change the original story. So someone reading it, Mike's not going to be able to know exactly what they're looking at.
So a story published by CNN, a story retracted by CNN, no apology, that's bad enough. But this, I think, absolutely takes the biscuit, because a CNN spokeswoman, according to this tweet, says there will not be disciplinary action in this case because Manu Raju followed the editorial standards process. And Patrick, I've got to ask, what type of editorial standards does CNN have if they're proud that this type of story can get through it?
Well, first of all, that's not a spokeswoman, although I can see how you made that mistake, but that's Brian Stelter. He's the host of Reliable Sources, the name of his show. He's the media watchdog at CNN. The name of his show is Reliable Sources, which is kind of laughable. But this is what he's saying. Well, we haven't violated any editorial standards, but our multiple sources just happen to get it multiply wrong. And did they even look at the original email, Mike? I don't think so.
No.
If they did, they're illiterate, or the email should have been in Braille. Anyway.
Yes. Well, we'll end with this one because George, how do you pronounce that?
Samuels. George Samuels, professor from London Metropolitan University, fantastic international relations pundit. So he's saying it's extraordinary that no one in the mainstream media is noting how bizarre it is that Mueller hasn't bothered to interview Julian Assange. Good point. So the man who could throw most of the light on the Trump-Russia collusion story, you'd think Mueller would be a little curious as to what Assange might have to say, and that kind of says it all there. Thank you, George Samuels, for that fantastic tweet.
Yes. Now, the issue of censorship on the internet is one that we're all being affected by, Patrick, and I just wanted to briefly highlight this because something strange happened on Friday. On Friday, UK Column News was put out, and within that was a video clip of Donald Tusk, who was talking about the latest issues over Brexit and so on. Well, that video was sourced from the European Council website, and it was quite clearly marked as being free of copyright for editorial use. So I'm free to use it as I choose. However, not soon after the news program was uploaded to YouTube, there was a copyright dispute filed against it by ITV. And basically, ITV had taken the same piece of copyright-free footage and had played sections of it on ITV. And because then that ITV had uploaded their program to their channel, and YouTube and ITV have a special deal, which means that anything that is on ITV's channel gets automatically flagged as copyrighted, then there was a similarity between what we put out and what they put out in the respect of this video from the Council of Europe. And so we had an automated copyright dispute in progress. Now, the UK Column doesn't monetize YouTube videos, but if we were monetizing YouTube videos, what this immediately does is it puts a block on any monetization on either side. So ITV can't monetize and on the basis of this video, and neither can we, right? And that process for resolving this copyright dispute lasts up to 30 days. Now, when an organization such as us are putting out a video that has a relatively short shelf life in the sense that we are doing this every single day of the week, and so we probably would, if we had been monetizing, we have a 24-hour window in which to do that, then what this is doing is absolutely penalizing the smaller operator, because the bigger operator has the right to come along and just automatically blanket ban material, whether they actually have the copyright to it or not.
So just to simplify what you just said, Mike, for anybody who might not quite understand what's going on here, basically ITV, if they use copyright-free material and anyone else uses the same copyright-free material, which is freely available on government websites, they will all be blocked or put in YouTube jail because ITV used it first.
Well, they didn't even use it first. We used it first.
Oh, used it first.
But because
they used it.
Because they used it at all.
Because ITV is colluding with YouTube and Google. What is this special deal? Can you get that special deal, Mike?
No.
With YouTube? Why can't you get that special deal? Because you're not able to collude?
With Google, because there's a cost involved.
There's a cost involved. So that barrier, whatever that barrier is, that financial barrier, certainly that's not good, Mike, for freedom of the press. This is a good example of that right here.
Absolutely. Okay, right. I just want to end on this because the Grenfell inquiry has opened today. Lots of Grenfell tar fire news in the papers today. Some of it not the best, but anyway, the inquiry has started for good or bad. We'll see how that progresses. But a number of things. First of all, there's going to be a memorial service in St Paul's Cathedral, which the council has been told not to attend. They are not going to be welcome. And I have to say, listening to the council representatives, including the chief executive talking on BBC Radio 4 this morning, about mainly they were discussing the disgraceful situation that here we are, whatever number of months it is afterwards, and still people are living in hotels. The council has said that they are going to guarantee that everybody is rehoused by next summer. And you've just got to ask, Patrick, why is it taking so long? This is just obscenity after obscenity as far as I'm concerned. So lots of skepticism of this inquiry process, absolute cynicism and skepticism over the rehousing process and the way that people that were affected by this are being treated. But as well as that, we've got an article in the Times today which is suggesting that people from outside the community that are trying to support the community, that there are lots of people doing this for their own ends, conspiracy theorists involved, people pushing questions about the numbers of people that died in the event still. And so there's still this whole business of trying to divide support for the Grenfell tar survivors and support for getting answers to what happened over that. I think that's all pretty cynical stuff. I myself don't have a huge amount of confidence that this inquiry is going to provide the right answers. And I'm not seeing anybody really getting to grips with pushing for the right answers.
No, and if you look at this inquiry, Mike, the pressure to have this inquiry as well came from the people more than anything. It came from the public. The government wasn't rushing to do an inquiry, right? So because it came from the people, what you can expect from the mainstream media, from the establishment, is an effort to marginalize, to demonize residents, firstly, to sort of somehow dampen down their concerns and their points. And I might add that one of the first people to make a big issue out of the reported number of dead, which is still kind of a little bit murky as to the methodology that the government or the police and the fire department have used to determine what that number is, was Member of Parliament for Tottenham, David Lammy. So this was a Member of Parliament who drove this issue. So is David Lammy a conspiracy theorist, or is he just someone who's concerned that the right information is getting to the public? That was the question that we actually put out on this show.
Well, I mean, he was
6 months ago.
Yeah, absolutely. He was close to it because he lost a friend. He was close to the community there, and so he was the right person to ask the question. But he was criticised for that on Radio 4 again this morning.
So you're going to look for the establishment rags, who are basically the Times and newspapers like this, will be going after residents, I predict, to protect the state or to protect the establishment. That's how I think this is going to go. And then they will swing this inquiry eventually to be sort of somehow blaming some resident for something, and use that to sort of get the government more or less off the hook, so they don't have to do a whole lot really to rectify the matter and to resolve the matter properly. So,
well, we will keep our eyes on this.
We hope not.
Absolutely.
We hope not, but don't be surprised if that's how it goes.
We'll keep our eyes on this and we'll report it as we feel appropriate. Okay, I think that's it for today. Patrick, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for joining us. If you like what we're doing, please consider supporting us by taking out a membership or making a donation. We can only do this with your help, and we want to do a lot more in 2018. We've had a good year this year. I think we've driven some things into the mainstream, as you were saying on the Sunday Wire last night, and we want to do that a lot more. So help us if you can, and we will be back at the same time tomorrow. We'll see you then. Goodbye.